Should you sit if the script says sit? Should you stand if the script says stand? What if your character sits and stands in the same scene? So many questions. Let's get you some answers so you can feel empowered. Hey everyone, I'm Matthew Cornwell with Get Taped here in Atlanta, Georgia, one of Atlanta's original audition taping services, which I co-own with my amazingly talented, beautiful wife and best friend, Brooke. And if you aren't currently subscribed to our Monday newsletter, the Scuttlebutt, it has extra information that is pertinent to actors, mainly here in the Southeast, but also applicable to actors everywhere. Okay, let's go over as many scenarios as possible where your character is either sitting or standing or both in the same scene. First, let's talk about a couple scenarios that should be obvious, but I feel like I should talk about them anyways. If your character is logically standing in your scene, well then, stand. If you have multiple scenes, and in one of the scenes your character sits, and then the next scene they're standing, and then the next they're sitting, shoot them separately. Even if the instructions say to submit one file, you can edit all of those scenes together into one continuous file, but shoot them separately. That seems obvious to someone who's been running a taping service for nearly 20 years, but I realize that if you're new to this game or new to self-taping, it may not be obvious. But yes, you have that freedom. Now let's say that your character starts seated and remains seated the entirety of the scene or scenes. Is it obvious that you should record the audition seated? Well, maybe, maybe not. It really depends on the scene and your character and the appropriate energy you want to get across in your audition. See, sometimes, even though the character is seated in the stage directions, you feel like it needs more energy and that being seated will steal some of that energy from you. So you decide to do it in a standing position. That's great, unless you have unfocused physical energy going side to side like this. You need to be able to contain your energy. This is just a good acting note overall. And so if you can't stand still, especially with a cell phone camera or a DSLR, where every motion side to side, forward and backward, is highly exaggerated compared to the type of cameras they use on set, you have to be super careful about standing for what should be maybe a seated scene, because very quickly they'll realize that you have this unfocused energy. So you have the freedom to stand in a seated scene. You just need to be able to contain the physicality in a way that isn't distracting. Okay, so now let's talk about the scenarios that you're probably hoping for, which is where your character transitions somewhere in the scene. And first, we'll start with the type of scene where the character enters, sits, and then starts talking. In a case like that, do what I just did. Come in, sit down, and start talking. Seems pretty easy. You can even edit the opening of your audition so that you minimize the amount of time that you're off screen. You can cut, just like I did, right when your face is coming into the shot so that we see you sitting down. We get that sort of transitional energy, and yet we're not watching an empty frame or we're not watching your torso for too long. Now let's say that your character exits the scene at the end after your last line of dialogue. Pretty simple, huh? Now, what if you have a quick line of dialogue at the beginning as you're entering and sitting into the scene? Well, let's do a demo. Sorry, I'm late. What'd I miss? See, you can deliver that line as you're entering and sitting down. And it's okay that my face was a little off camera as I started to deliver that. Seriously, you're not going to get fired from the world of acting because you started off camera. Trust me. But okay, Matt, let's say that you have the very tough decision to make, which is a scene where your character is standing for half the scene, but then suddenly there's a line of dialogue from the reader saying, "Would you please have a seat already? You're making me nervous." What do you do then? Well, one solution is to start seated, but at the edge of your chair with really good posture for the first part of the scene. And then when they tell you to please sit, you're making me nervous, you can sort of relax your posture and move backwards into the chair. And if there's a backrest to the chair, you could even lean fully back into the chair and allow that change in posture to be an indication to the viewer that you are honoring the stage direction, but you're not going crazy with standing and sitting. But let's say you're not comfortable with that sort of nuance of physicality. You can just ignore the stage directions and the fact that there's a line of dialogue indicating this change in posture. It's okay. Spoiler alert, you're not a director, you're not a set designer, and you're not a cinematographer. So you are not on the hook to recreate the script word for word as it's written. And so if trying to discover a solution is giving you stress, then stop. Just stop. You're allowing fear to enter the equation. Instead, focus on the character, focus on the backstory, focus on your script analysis, focus on your objective and your obstacles. Don't focus on a stage direction that, quite honestly, might disappear the moment you get to set anyways, because the director sees the furniture, sees the available camera angles, and decides, you know what? We're not going to do this seated. It's going to take too long to set up. We'll just do the whole thing standing. And then you're thinking back to that audition where you stressed out so much over the fact that my character came in and sat down. And then you're wondering, but there's a line of dialogue. And then the director says, we'll scratch that line of dialogue. It's that simple. And these types of changes happen all the time on set. So if the director and if the entire cast and crew on set has to be adaptable to things that change, then this gives you the power as the actor to be just as adaptable in your auditions when it just doesn't make sense to go crazy with lots of staging. So relax and take this as an opportunity to be empowered and to not be filled with fear. And trust me, casting will understand. They know what the scene is, and they know that most people are taping at home where you don't have lots of furniture and the ability to change your height in the middle of a scene. So it's okay. You can make the executive decision to just ignore those changes in elevation for your character and to pick one. You could stand the whole time. You could sit the whole time. It's okay. Because if you start slipping into that fear-based mentality of, oh, but what if I am going to piss off the casting director because I didn't sit halfway through? Oh, is the reason why I didn't book because I didn't sit? What if? What if? What if? Just stop. That fear-based mentality has become your biggest obstacle to booking. Another clever solution is to find a stool that is very tall, such that you can start your scene standing like I am, and then you can sit down in the middle of the scene and you only lose maybe a couple inches of elevation. See, there's not that much headroom. I'm on an adjustable stool, so if this stool was much lower, then when I go from standing to sitting, I suddenly become a Muppet, and it's no longer really effective, and it's going to be distracting. And finally, well, before I get to that, you do have a reader, right? And hopefully it's not a Zoom reader every time you're doing a self-tape. Now, I get it, and casting directors get it, that there are times where you must use a Zoom reader or a virtual reader of some other kind because you just can't find someone or you're on vacation, etc. But for your normal setup or when the opportunity warrants it, you should get a reader who is an actor, not a non-actor neighbor or spouse, but an actual actor as your reader, or come to get taped or some other taping service so that you can benefit possibly from this final option. Because this last option might just blow your mind a little bit, depending on your experience. And for this, I want to cut to our Get Tape studio. You can walk into a scene and have some dialogue, and then as you sit, you have your reader follow you. Gasp, what? Of course, you need a decent tripod so that that tilt down is nice and smooth, but when it works, well, it's glorious. Now, the problem is if you do something like that, if you stand up in the middle of the scene or you sit down when you haven't told your reader, well, you might have to rehearse it a few times to make that nice and smooth. Wow. Pretty cool, huh? And once again, your neighbor, who is not an actor, if you call them over to your apartment and have them try to do this while reading the scene with you, it's not going to end well. So that's why I say make sure that your reader is an actor who is comfortable working the tripod while reading the script at the same time. Just be warned, you might have to practice it a lot with that reader, or you might need to come to a professional taping service where they have good tripods, where we do have readers that are experienced in multitasking. I mean, heck, I've been helping actors tape auditions since 2005. Yeah, so I'm actually really good at reading and moving a camera, not just tilting, but also panning side to side if the actor is starting to leave frame. But again, I've essentially become an expert at that. And so you're not going to find that level of expertise from your neighbor or even from an actor who's never done that before. You need someone who's experienced and comfortable doing that while also giving you a good enough read that it's not distracting, it's not losing the pace because they forget the script while they're working on the tripod, and then they're back to the script, but then they don't see that you moved, and then they're back on the tripod. If it's not worth it because the actor who's your reader is uncomfortable, then bag this idea. But I just wanted to show it to you as sort of the bonus expert option if you want to explore it and if you want to have fun with it. Because that's the bottom line here, is that this should be about curiosity, about exploration, about creativity, and about play. It should not be about booking the audition and that fear-based mindset. No, that is not the point of this video. I showed you some of these nuances of the sitting and standing because it's a question that came up in a recent comment, and because it is a valid question of what is available to us, what is allowed in the audition. But we need to get past this fear-based mentality of what am I allowed to do versus what am I not allowed to do. You need to get to a point where you start to feel more empowered to take your career into your own hands by first taking these auditions into your hands. But that doesn't come easily. You need to study. You need to watch some free YouTube videos, but you need to get into a class. You need to train, not just for a weekend, not just for 6 months, for years. I'm sorry to say, this is not some sort of easy fly-by-night vocation that you can just dip into, become famous, and woo, cash all those checks at your bank. This is a lifetime commitment, and we're just trying to give you here at this Get Tape channel some nuggets, some wisdom, some inspiration that overall is designed to remove the fear from your mentality and instead replace it with empowerment. So, with that in mind, take control of your audition. Take control of your career. That's it for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on set. Oh, crap, the seat is too low.